Welcome to Montana Whiskey, Wealth, and Freedom.
Well, I've been in love, I've been on the ground, I've gotten back on my feet, just to fall back down on my knees for you and your whiskey under the bridge.
All right, hello, Treasure Nation. Welcome to the Treasure Trove. It's an edutainment show that deals with wealth, whiskey, and freedom. And you might be tuned in for the whiskey that you want, but I guarantee you're going to stay for the information that you end up needing from a financial perspective. In the show today, we're not going to talk just about money. We are actually going to talk about the flow and control of money and why and how that's important to your freedom. So for today, my co-host to my left is Karen Goff. And Karen, I'm going to ask you just to go ahead and give a 1 to 2 minute introduction about yourself.
I am a Certified Liability Advisor through the National Institute of Financial Education, as well as being a mortgage advisor with CMG Home Loans. And so it's always important to me to make sure that people see their home and how it fits into big picture planning.
That's all you got, huh?
Yeah.
All right. Across the table for me is Kyle Reese, and there's lots of great things I could say about Kyle, but I would prefer he share information about himself that he chooses to share with the Treasure Nation's audience. So take it away, Kyle.
You know, it's easier for me to let you talk about me instead of me talk about me, right?
Nobody can sell themselves better than you can.
Yes, no, that's true. So I'm an infinite banking practitioner through the Nelson Nash Institute, and I have been doing this for the last 6 years, and I really enjoy helping people see how much freedom they can find in owning the banking function for themselves. So sell life insurance, teach infinite banking, and generally speaking, every day my life is filled with helping people get where they're going. That's my favorite thing to do.
Are you just Kyle Reese, or do you have a company? Do you have how do you market yourself?
It's funny you asked that, actually, because I'm actually going through a book right now on personal branding. So that's an interesting question timing wise. But I do business through a small agency. Create Tailwind is the name of the agency that we do business through. And it's me and a few other guys, and we just love serving people across the nation. Here in Montana, I like serving people. But yeah, we've got clients everywhere.
All right. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to jump right into the educational topic of the show. And I've broken it up into 3 different parts. The title of the first part is The Big What, Why Care? So the quote, I guess first of all, let me ask you both. I'm gonna share the quote, and then just to set up as an agreed upon premise, I'm gonna ask everybody to just chime in on agreement or not and why. The quote is if some authoritative power distributed all of the money in the world equally among all of the people in the world, within 10 years' time, 97% of all the money would be under the control of 3% of the people. So I guess, again, let's make sure that we are in agreement on the premise before we work off of that. So where do we stand on that perspective? Do we agree with it?
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Karen?
Yeah.
I mean, I've never seen wealth distributed like that and then gone back to the 3%, but I could totally understand where that's coming from, and I would be shocked if it didn't happen.
Right. Yeah. Well, why does it happen? I guess that's the big question. So, that's where we need to kind of start with, is sort of build a foundation around understanding why this premise is true and actually why it's so dangerous to people's financial freedom.
Why does it happen? That's a question.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Why does it? Why does this happen? If we agree with the premise that this is, if all of the money were distributed equally within 10 years, 97% of it will be in the hands of 3 people. How does this occur?
3%.
Like 3%. Yeah.
That would be three really wealthy people.
Well, but
So
yeah.
it all comes down to control, right? Who controls what? And it's not just about the money. Money is a byproduct of the economic impact. It's a byproduct of the relationships that are held, of business that is conducted. And so even if all of the money, the byproduct, is spread out, the real truth is that there's a very selective group of people that controls how things work in our economy, and eventually, because they control it, they will also control the money. It'll flow back to them.
Do you want to add anything to that, Karen?
Yeah, I mean that exactly what he's saying. But basically, the banking industry as a whole has so much control over people's lives that they don't even know it, and they happily just go and turn it over to them.
So would you say, Karen, that the banking industry is the 3%?
Along those lines, anything that would be able to, certainly a big part of it, I would think, would be that some form of that industry.
So not necessarily just FDIC banks, but the people who are out there loaning. But okay.
Wait. No, I think you're asking something maybe different than she's understanding. Yeah, because when you just make the distinction of FDIC banks, they're the ones that are plugged into the federally regulated banking system. Right. But you're saying anybody that's involved in the banking industry that can go all down, that even include individuals?
Well, FDIC is only American, so like this is worldwide. So if, all of the banking system that is through everything, we kind of live in a global banking economy at this point.
Right. No, I agree with you. I go back in time to Rockefellers. Mm-hmm. So in the time where Rockefeller was getting started, he controlled a ton of stuff. He wasn't necessarily the bank.
Right.
But he would have been included in that 3% because he had created so many cash flowing assets. He controlled so many different elements even within his empire that no matter where money went, it would come back to him. Was he JP Morgan Chase? No. Was he Wells Fargo? No. He was just Rockefellers. Mm-hmm. And Rockefellers isn't a bank. Now, they've privatized the banking function through different assets with trusts and different instruments, mm-hmm. but they're not necessarily what Americans would consider, or I would say the general populace would consider, a banking institution. And that's why I think it's important to recognize there's a distinction between commercialized banking and privatized banking, because privatized banking is extremely powerful and does a whole lot, and that money, they are going to be part of that 3%.
Well, I think that's what makes it so complicated or complex and hard for people to really fully wrap their brains and their arms around, of understanding how the whole system really is really interwoven and connected, where in my opinion, that even though there is the central banks that essentially control the money supply of all nations, there are a lot more moving gears to that machinery, with people like individuals like, we'd have to come up with a modern day Rockefeller would be like an equivalent at the individual level, but they themselves represent, they're the I was going to say captains of industry, but that's probably not even grandiose enough.
Well, Elon Musk would be a good one there.
Yeah.
Of not a bank, but yeah.
So, but where I'm going with that is that they even too, they're involved in the same kind of the same game scheme, if you will, where if you think about what happens when the Fed decides to quote unquote print money, which is, this is kind of the way that we refer to it, even though we understand they're not actually printing money. The distribution of that printed money goes to certain people first, that allows them to take advantage of the advantageous position that they're in, like the Rockefellers, if you will, where I think that's where they then can become contributors to the entire makeup of the system, right? So like, even though they represent a different facet or component of the system, they're still tied into the system
Yes.
because of that, because of the way things flow, because of the distribution.
Right. I guess my distinction, I was just wanting to make sure that I understood what Karen was saying.
Yeah.
Was that it's not just centralized banks that are part of that 3%. They don't
Right.
control everything. They control a lot, right? They don't control everything. It's there's a lot of other people of influence that have created a lot of wealth, and yeah, they might, like Rockefeller and Chase, they were pretty close. So it's not like he didn't have. I think a lot of successful people have good relationships with bankers because, I mean, nothing really happens without banking. But that doesn't mean necessarily that the bank controls it. If the person or the entity that person controls is controlling a lot of cash flow, it's going to go back to them, not just to the bank. And I think that it's important to have a distinction there, because one of the things that I've found that people find to be a little bit sad or hopeless is like, banking is so far out of our reach. Control is so far out of our reach. So why try? And if I can't be part of that 3%, why try? I think it's important to share the message that no, there are a lot of individuals who would be part of that 3% that aren't necessarily part of the banking system. They might have good relationships and connections with the banking systems, but they're not necessarily tied into it or part of it.
Right. Right. Well, and that also just goes to what the other note that I had here that I just want to make the comment on was that, when I was putting this together, obviously the banks are the obvious one, but again, going back to understanding the other gears that make up the machinery does include mortgage companies, because, the mortgage companies they kind of serve dual roles in the banking system, or multiple roles. But the big one for me that doesn't really get talked about enough is Wall Street. The investment firms and the hedge funds, and there's a reason why they get the returns that they have been getting, because they're linked to all of the inflation of that, the inflationary process of the monetary system, which they benefit from first and foremost. And a lot of those people, those really uber, wealthy people you're talking about that control a lot of that in a different capacity, they're the ones that ultimately get to maximize the benefit of what happens around that part of the financial industry. And then it further advantages them or leverages them to be able to do even more with their wealth in a banking function capacity. So it just becomes cyclical, right? Like it just snowballs. It just builds on itself. But I had, in this first part, I had two other questions I was going to ask kind of as follow-up questions to the first one, but I think it would be a little redundant to probably ask those questions based on what we've already discussed. I'll tell you what, here's what we'll do. I'll ask them, but if you agree that we've already kind of covered that, then we can just move on. But if there's anything specific that you want to talk about in addition that you feel like these questions.
Perfect.
Okay. So the other question is, what does it say about the financial system most people are unknowingly part of?
Do you want to provide an answer for that one, Karen?
I mean, I would agree that that pretty much got covered in everything else of around there, what it all looks like and who's actually contributing where.
Yeah. And then I would just add, I guess, a little bit is consumers consume and owners own.
That's a good one. So
consumers would be the 97%. If you give them a bunch of money, they're going to consume. Where is that going to go? Back to the owners. If the owners own 3%, it's going to go back to their hands. 10 years, give it 3 years, 5 years max. It's all going to flow back to them. Very short amount of time.
Very good point. I'm glad I asked the question because that was worth hearing. So here's the third one then. If money naturally flows to those who ultimately control the banking function, then what does that mean for the rest of us? It's kind of a leading question, isn't it, for you? With where we're going in this conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I feel like we already covered that one too. But
we can move on.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's move on.
Okay. I don't know exactly how I would answer it without giving extra clarity, you know.
Or getting ahead of your host and starting the next topic or conversation. We're going to officially jump into the part 2 of the educational topic, which I titled Exploration with Kyle. Not that we're not already exploring with you, but this is a little bit more personal for you and a little bit more specific for you, as far as, you know, what you do for trying to help, or not trying, but for helping other people with what you do with your work. So for someone who has never, you mentioned in your intro that you are forgive me, I can't exactly remember the terminology you use, but did you say that you are an expert with the infinite banking concept, a professional with the how did you say it? I can't remember what you said.
I never claimed to be an expert. As soon as
I knew
start
that wasn't
claiming
right.
to be an expert, I'm screwed.
I understand. And you suffer from the arrival syndrome, right?
Oh man,
Yeah.
Thank Nelson for that. I appreciate that reminder all the time. Infinite banking practitioner. That's what I tell people. You know, is in. I help people bring banking to the you and me level.
Okay. So the specific question is, for someone who's never heard of the infinite banking concept, how would you explain it and the philosophy behind it?
Perfect. So I think to dive into that infinite banking concept, that's 3 words that we don't always use, right? And so let's address banking first, because I think it helps understand like the theory of banking. We'll go into that really quick. With every single bank, there's a depositor, right? Every bank, to be profitable, also has to have a borrower. So you've got a depositor feeding money into a bank, and then you've got a borrower borrowing money from the bank. The third party in this whole situation is the owner. You and me, everyone that's like general population, we're all consuming finances. We're utilizing finances. We're putting those into a spot. We're borrowing from a spot to do life, to buy houses, to do whatever it might be. And so it's important to recognize that we are already the depositor and the borrower of a banking system. Infinite banking is all about, since you're doing that anyways, why not also become the owner? Because it's profitable to do that. And if you can be the borrower, the depositor, and the owner, you can create a fence around the whole banking system, and you can capitalize or profit from every transaction. That's really what infinite banking is all about, is creating a fence around the banking function and privatizing that to yourself. When you do that, you will find, and our clients do find, that the opportunities become extremely abundant. And it's very easy to say that the opportunities have an infinite number. There's an infinite number of opportunities that are available because you're now in control of banking.
So just to get a little bit more specific on that final parting, or the last comment, I think that it's one of the things I think that people struggle with when, you know, everybody, because we all live lives of cash and cash flow, and a lot of that has to depend on our access to capital. So if we don't have available income or cash that we're earning on a month-to-month basis, or however you get paid, then you have to look elsewhere for some source of capital in order to do what you want, whether it's, you know, for whatever reason. Where was I going with that?
Well, just to follow up with what you're saying,
yeah,
everything that we buy is financed. Everything,
right?
Every single thing is financed. You're either paying money to borrow third-party capital, or you're losing opportunity cost when you spend cash, right? So whether or not you're, whichever way you go, there is a cost to financing anything, and infinite banking is about owning the control over the banking function, so that when you do borrow money, you're borrowing it from your system, from the owner, right? You're already playing the borrower. So while you're playing the borrower, borrow from an entity that you own so that you can be profitable, so that your bank can be profitable. Because when you do that, you can create additional cash flow.
Yeah, and I think that's that's where I was trying to go with that. I got stuck, but I think it was more just the again, being able to establish more control over that function in your life, because you have created your own access to the capital, depending on how, from a behavior standpoint and a planning standpoint, how you've structured that opportunity. So I think that's a critical component, because
Yes.
it really does. If we're talking about going back to the very intro beginning, this show was really about why the control of the flow of money is important to your financial freedom. That's, you just kind of just knocked that out of the park with what you just said about why people would want to consider getting involved with infinite banking.
Yeah, and so access is one of those things that's really important, and is that, like, it's so ingrained in the whole infinite banking's thought process and action that you almost don't even think about it. Banking is just, whether you're talking about like a blood bank or a river bank, or any bank at all, a money bank, it's just a pooling up of one particular thing in an area where you have the ability to access it. You can do infinite banking with different instruments. There are certain instruments, when you want to get really deep and technical about it, that give you more guarantees, that give you more access, that give you more liquidity. And those are all things that help solidify the banking element, so that you can go take risks, you can go do these other things without wondering if your banking system is okay, because it's built on really solid foundation.
One of the things that's so great about it, again, as we live our lives of cash and cash flow, a lot of the decisions that need to come in are, am I going to take care of lifestyle today or lifestyle tomorrow? So if I spend it instead of investing it, I'm enjoying it now, but I'm not taking care of my retirement or whatever. But the beautiful thing about controlling your own banking function is you can actually do both. Mm-hmm. The whole time you're living off of lifestyle today, borrowing for your car, borrowing for whatever it happens to be. If you're borrowing it from yourself, ultimately you're also taking care of your lifestyle tomorrow within that function.
Right. Yeah. And a huge element, the way that infinite banking is done, or I should say the instrument that exists right now that is best for implementing infinite banking is specifically designed whole life insurance. And so when you use those contracts for the banking function, like you said, is it lifestyle today or lifestyle in the future? When you use these instruments correctly, because you're solving for the banking function, our clients end up with way more death benefit than they would ever even consider purchasing. And so not only are we taking care of our lifestyle, we're able to take care of our lifestyle today, we're also putting money into motion so that we can take care of our lifestyle tomorrow. And when we pass away, there's a death benefit that goes to the survivors, so we're taking care of their lifestyle. And so it's a whole picture, which is why Nelson was so clear about think long range. As long as we're addressing only lifestyle today or lifestyle tomorrow, we're going to miss the picture. You got to see everything even beyond you to really get what infinite banking is all about.
And I think that's one of the reasons why people like us, I'll include all of us, is that how important it is to appreciate that it truly is a concept and philosophical in nature, because you had made the comment about there are other instruments that could work for infinite banking as far as that concept is concerned, but there are some that work better than others. But that's the key, right? The key is to understand that infinite banking isn't about a product; it's about a concept that's rooted in proper philosophical economic thought that allows you advantages that you don't have if you're not practicing it.
Yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and get into the third part just to make sure that we get this covered as well before we run out of time. It's very cleverly titled, Exploration with Kyle Continued.
That's great.
Isn't it? I mean, I thought hard about that one, but here we go.
Perfect.
Okay, Kyle.
Yeah.
So from your perspective, and I kind of do think we just kind of discussed this, but let's give it a whirl. From your perspective, why is it so important for individuals to take back the banking function in their own lives?
That becomes a personal question for every single individual. You've got to know your why. If you don't know your why, why do anything? I mean, it really doesn't matter. And so when there are certain people that should have access to capital, and there's also certain people that should not have access to capital. I've been both, okay? Mm-hmm. So I can say that with confidence. I've had access to capital and I've absolutely ruined stuff because I had access to capital, made things way worse than they were. So it's for the people that want to exercise their freedom and take their passion to the marketplace, take their vision and make it become a reality. You need access to capital. Now, if you don't want to do that, don't do that. And you don't need access to capital, that's totally fine. And maybe if that's the way that you would prefer to choose to live, which I'm not saying there's anything wrong with, right? Then it might be better to remove access to the capital for yourself and put it in somebody else's hands, like a financial advisor, a money babysitter, whatever it might be, because there's a fear of what would I do with that. So I wouldn't even necessarily say, why is it so important for every individual to have to start owning the banking function, I think was the question. I would say for the people who want to go take their will and make it a reality, you have to have access to capital. And there's going to be swings in the market. There's going to be attitude changes at the bank. There's going to be personnel, I should say, changes at your bank. And so there's so many fluctuating factors that exist within the banking world and within the finance world. If you're trying to rely on that to go do what you want to do, you're going to have to play the game. You're going to have to follow the rules, and you're going to be subject to whatever the market says is right now. And then you have to decide whether that is something that you want to engage in to carry out your will or not. With infinite banking, when you own the banking function, that whole side of it, all of the questions that come with relying on other parties for capital is now nothing that you have to worry about. You have the position of power, you have the leverage to go take your will and make it a reality.
I think that it feels like, again, the next question, which I feel like is just naturally being answered in conversation, which is good. As the financial world becomes less stable, how would somebody with an IBC mindset that you were just talking about be in a stronger position than the average household? And again, I think you kind of just summed it up pretty well, but I don't know if there's anything specific you'd want to add to that.
Totally, yeah. There's when bad things happen, when things get unstable, we need stability. People gravitate to stability, right? So if, let's just say you have a very stable banking system and everything around you is going unstable, there's now opportunities for you to acquire what that person might view as a liability because of their current instability, but because of your stability, you know how to turn it into an asset. Mm-hmm. So you're liberating them from fear, you're liberating them from risk, and you are capitalizing on an opportunity that you're going to turn into an asset and cash flow. That can happen because you are standing on a solid foundation of banking, right? The other thing that will happen when there's a pillar of there's a stable pillar, people will gravitate towards that. So opportunities will come out of the woodworks for people during very difficult times for the masses because they have what it takes to be able to support these other people, whether it is liberating them from the stress or whatever it might be. We don't really know. That's again infinite. Like there's a infinite number of possibilities that could exist, but when you have that solid foundation, opportunities come to you and you can take advantage of them.
Yeah, I love that. That's really touches on a concept that I want to flesh out in later conversations around really empowering people to become anti-fragile, like, sort of establishing that the opposite of vulnerability. And because I think that's really important in this day and age, as we're kind of in the direction we're going in and the things you hear on the news, and everything seems to be going in a specific direction, whatever that is or looks like. So I think now more than ever, it's kind of key to do what you can to establish that your own financial foundation, like you're talking about. Did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Along the, becoming anti-fragile, that it's interesting to me from the concept of, a while ago, it occurred to me that mankind created the concepts of time and money. They don't exist for anything else. They became things that we created to get around on. Because of that, we turned around and made ourselves slaves to time and money. And so many of the things that we're constantly bombarded with, the game, again, gets played by the 3% in a way that it encourages us to stay slaves to that, because easy money, right? All of the things with credit cards and easy lending and all of those things that come out of the woodworks for people, that they overextend themselves because they have to keep up with the Joneses or whatever it happens to be. I have to live this lifestyle I've never even thought about if I actually want. How do you actually help them to, there's a huge thing there of helping them actually step out of that, see the perspective of how they've enslaved themselves, and then take the steps they need to stop that, to break those chains and get themselves in control.
Totally. Was that a question for me, or you just...
No,
okay.
No, it's just kind of my statement,
No,
but
I
if you have
agree.
something to add, for sure.
I would love to hear more about your statement about mankind creating the concepts of time and money, specifically time. What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, obviously, time happens. We get older, all that kind of stuff. But there was never, there's no other animal who has this concept of a year's past or 5 years past, or I'm punching the clock for my job because I have to put in 40 hours a week, or whatever it happens to be. All these different constructs that we've came up with, milestones. I have to retire at 65. Whatever it happens to be that we stuck in there, that time's, as far as the setting of the sun and aging and stuff, is going to happen. But the concept of things have to happen at certain times, or we have to have a certain amount of money by this time so we can retire. All of those are uniquely human.
Yeah,
and I'm uniquely human in living in the Western world where we live. I mean, I don't know how much, if anybody's still living in tribe somewhere or something, have the same concept of time that we have.
Yeah, no, thanks for clarifying that, because I was trying to figure out how man created time, and I was like, nah, I don't think
the concept of time, not created time, just the concept of being aware of it.
So being aware of time, but then establishing our own boundaries to operate within, right? I always think back to retirement. Why in the world are we talking about retiring? We're cutting our lifespan in half by focusing on retiring. And maybe that's why they push it so much. I don't know. Yeah. No, that's really interesting. I enjoy asking clients, what was your first memory of money? Because it's interesting hearing what was the very first impact that money had on a human. Generally informs how they have a relationship with money now. Right. And it's funny, very few people have an abundant approach towards money. It's very scarce oriented relationship with money, and it's sad, and it's sad to hear some people's I was promised I was going to get this much money by my uncle, and I did the job, and he said you didn't do a good job, so he didn't pay me anything. And it's oof. So that's your first memory of money. How do you break out of that? How do you step back and see that money isn't necessarily a bad thing? One one thing that has stuck with me for a long time is, I don't know if you're familiar with Lapin. He's a rabbi, and he wrote a book.
Daniel Lapin.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. You've read his book?
Not as read his book, but I'm familiar with him.
Okay. Yeah. And his book was the 10 Commandments of money, I think something like that. Anyways, he talks about how money, to think of a dollar bill as a token of gratitude. If someone's giving you $1, it's because they're grateful for you. If it's $100 or $1 million, that shows the level of gratitude that they have for you. And I generally will, when I'm talking with clients, try to help them see that. Like, money is just a way of expressing our gratitude for a job well done or for anything like that. And if someone's not grateful to you, then hey, find someone else who is.
Well, it's interesting what you're saying too, because part of what we do at National Institute of Financial Education, we have an entire course around cash and liability mastery, and it starts out with mindset. What's your money mindset? And understanding, did you hear things like money's the root of all evil, or the filthy rich, or whatever it happens to be, and how much those get stuck into our stories, and how much we live them out because of them getting stuck in there.
Yeah.
So that's another one that, I always like to dive in to people to help them uncover that themselves, of where they're living in the, it comes up all the time. Well, I'm sure in your world, but in a lot of the things I do too. Well, if I haven't heard of this, it can't be good because, well, okay. Do you think everything that's mainstream is like in your best interest, or do you think that follow the money trail, maybe it's in their best interest, which is why they have sent it out to the masses?
Yeah.
Well, we got to wrap things up here, but I just wanted to make mention that I don't know if you're aware of this or not yet, Kyle, but the way this whole process is going to work around the show is anybody that hears this, that is interested in the information, that wants to follow along with the show, they have the opportunity to sign up as a free member. They'll have access to all the show content and more. And when they do sign up to become a free member of the show, I have within the community that I've created, the Treasure community, there are different channels, and people can click on the channels for various reasons or purposes, whether it's to access one of the specific shows, or the one thing I want to mention is that there's a channel that's set up just for free consult. And what it does is when they go into the channel, it allows them to go into an appointment setting calendar where they can take advantage of a free 1 hour long consult. And what that process looks like is that appointment's set up comes to me first, and then I just visit with the people real quickly and just sort of determine what they're looking for and what their questions are. And then if it makes sense, then it would be an opportunity to introduce that member to you and or Karen, depending on what they're looking for, help with. And it's a great way, I think, to get them connected from the education they're learning about the show to sit down with somebody and be able to have a discussion on their personal circumstance and situation and how this information could apply to them. So I just want to make mention of that is, ultimately what we're trying to create here for people is that opportunity, not just the education itself, which is great, but the fact that there's something they can do with what they learn on the show as well. So 1 minute remaining, quick final thought from Kyle. One piece of advice you'd give anyone listening who wants more financial freedom. 60 seconds or less.
Rethink your thinking.
Rethink your thinking.
Rethink your thinking. Nelson said it. I can't say it any better. He said all the time, the fish are the last to notice the water. Yet they're the ones swimming in it. They don't know they're wet. Most of us have no idea the circumstances that we're in, and it takes a little bit of time to step back and be willing to rethink your thinking and then move forward.
I love it.
Yeah, I would say along with that's great, but anything that challenges your paradigm, like your box is all your thoughts, and as soon as that's what you think is true because it's in your box. And as soon as something challenges that, you have two choices. You can just ignore it, or you can get a bigger box. Yeah.
Well, at Create Tailwind, we've got hammers for every paradigm. We smash those things as fast as we can. So,
well, it'll be fun. So we'll be doing the show with you once a month, and I think this is the beginning of a really fun, interesting conversation. The only challenge we're going to have is, we could take these conversations and turn them into 3-hour conversations quite easily, but just try to stay, more on the pithy side from a show standpoint. I think we're skimming the surface, but
it'll be fun as it builds because we can get deeper.
We can layer as we go. So what we started talking about today, we can build on the next show and the next show and the next show and see where it goes.
Perfect.
Thank you, Kyle.
Yeah.
Now I gotta run back to Montana. I had my fun